Well, it's an unfortunate story, but something we have been covering here often at FreightWaves. Yet another carrier has closed its doors. Fifth bankruptcy so far this year. We're talking about LME.
Yeah, it's the fifth major bankruptcy. So there have been a lot of small bankruptcies, and typically every year there's a couple of hundred in the trucking business. But these are much bigger and historical companies that are going under. LME is an LTL carrier that operates based in Minnesota and operates in the Midwest. Just suddenly shut down yesterday. 400 trucks, about 600 employees were impacted.
I was reading on Facebook, people just got text messages. One of those things, just don't come to work. Were there any signs that they were struggling?
Well, there was a significant amount of litigation around this company. So it's it's been in business for many decades. So the original company was Lakeville Motor Express, which is a unionized LTL carrier that a couple of years ago, the unionized Lakeville actually shut down, but the founders had created something called LME, and they operated a non-union operation as LME. And so the National Labor Relations Board, on behalf of the Teamsters, actually sued the principals behind LME, suggesting that effectively that LME was a proxy of the old Lakeville Motor Express, that the bankruptcy was to get out of an uncooperative contract.
Yes.
And so the NLRB this January met and decided, and they released it in April, that basically the company had 60 days to start paying basically back wages, 1.25 million, and if they didn't pay the back wages, that amount would double to 2.4 million. And so this is effectively what happened to LME. Is the timing is interesting because that ruling came out, basically they had to start paying within 60 days of April 30th, 2019. We know that this is mid-July, so I actually wonder if that's not what put them over the edge. That combined with a soft freight market and just overall soft conditions, it suggests that that may be part of it.
Is this a sign, like you said, a soft freight market, is this a sign that things are not great right now in the freight market?
They're not great. Yeah. And you're going to see, I think, a lot of the public truckload carriers and LTL carriers are talking about softness. We've seen it on the global stage. And things that impact the global economies actually impact the U.S. It's not a zero-sum game. Everybody thinks about trade as if one person gets something, it hurts another person. That's sort of ridiculous when you think about it. And so at the end of the day, what's happening is the global economy is slowing down, the U.S. domestic manufacturing economy is slowing down, and that is really hurting the viability of a lot of these trucking companies, particularly the ones that are on the border, that are not doing exceptionally well, that maybe had overbuilt their capacity or didn't have functional operations to the degree that others and high quality carriers did. I think that's where we're going to see the struggles. With
what we've been seeing this whole summer and the past few months with things not being great, I hate to ask this, but is this just the first of many carriers to close its doors?
Well, we've seen 5, and not 5 small ones. These are significant carriers. I mean, New England Motor Freight was quite large and a historic New England-based carrier. We've seen Falcon that went out under, a flatbed carrier. A couple other flatbed carriers went out. This is just a suggestion that the economy, the freight economy, is really soft. Last year we didn't see a lot of bankruptcies because high tides lift all boats. Yeah. This year it's a different story, and I think we're certainly going to see tougher markets, particularly if we go into a deeper recession, as it would be classified by an economist, not just a freight recession. Yeah. I think we're going to see significant struggles. And in fact, yesterday, ACT, we had called in mid-May, we sit down here in mid-May on May 22nd and said that the freight market was headed into a recession. Yes. Now, fast forward 2 months later, ACT, a firm that studies a lot of the data and has a lot of traditional economists who wait for confirmation, have basically came out yesterday and said we're in a trucking recession. So it's very apparent things are softening, and there doesn't appear to be anything to sort of push us out of that short term. Now, having said that, if there are more bankruptcies, which we believe, or I believe that there will be, then we could see the capacity map sort of absorb the freight that's out there, and some of the carriers will do better. I think third quarter is going to be really, really rough for the trucking market. My belief is that we'll have a pretty tough go in the third quarter, and then retail sales are going to drive what happens in the fourth quarter. So if we have a really good, if consumer spending stays strong and the broader part of the consumer market, employment stays strong, then we should have a pretty decent fourth quarter for the majority of the market. But third quarter looks like it's going to be pretty rough.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a business owner and you have this was 400 trucks plus, what are you thinking right now? How do you survive in this economy we're seeing?
Well, I think LME was a troubled carrier. Okay. So I think we have to look at that, and you have to take each of these bankruptcies and study them at what the backstory of the company. So if you look at LME, troubled carrier, they bankrupted their union shop years ago, moved into a non-union operation, but still carried a lot of that baggage forward. And we're in an environment where it's, this has happened before. We saw it in the 80s where CF, Consolidated FreightWaves, and basically Conway was the non-union version, had merged out. I believe Schneider in like the 70s or something had done something similar. So we've seen this before. This has played out where a union, when you have this unconstructive union contract, that the founders will start a non-union version and sort of differ. For whatever reason, and I'm not privy to the details of the case, the National Labor Relations Board did not feel as if they had done it legitimately, had done it in a way that protected them. So this created a lot of baggage. So I think LME specifically is a specific company story. New England Motor Freight appears to be an Amazon e-commerce driven story. Again, a union carrier.
Yes. Yeah.
Falcon appeared to have heavy exposure to automotive and GM. The flatbed carrier in Alabama, this flatbed is soft and stuff. So we're seeing I think the Indiana carrier had bad insurance exposure. So we're seeing a lot of these different things. I think it's hard to draw conclusions for the whole market based on these individual bankruptcies. But what it does suggest is there isn't any fat in the system. There's nothing to sort of provide a base level of support. And so if you operate if you're a weak operator to begin with, this might push you over the edge. Okay. Whereas last year you wouldn't have seen that.
Yeah. So definitely some good advice there and definitely something to watch out. Again, we were talking about the sudden closure of LTL carrier LME. If you want to read more about this, just head to FreightWaves.com.